Obviously, there is a fear for the future of NATO under Trump, or simply, not necessarily whether Trump would pull out of NATO, but whether he would honor it, whether he would give the kind of support to Ukraine that we've seen before. So that European dimension does become more important.
Bruno, welcome to the show. What's been the reaction in Brussels to news of Keir Starmer's victory?
His victory has been welcomed. They're looking forward to a constructive relationship. The word security is used a lot. We're going to hear it a lot from Starmer as well. He's got a NATO summit in Washington next week. Then he'll be hosting all the EU's leaders and about 12 or 13 extra at Blenheim Palace about 10 days afterwards. And I think security is going to be a big theme for him on the international stage. And one of the things he will want to talk about with the EU, possibly to the end of the year, is some kind of security pact. About collective security, but also bringing in energy security, climate change as well. And there he really is pushing at an open door. Although on mainland continental Europe, politics is shifting the other way. It's shifting to the right. So two good friends for Starmer, and they know him as well, Macron and Scholz in Germany. President Macron in France is in trouble. Chancellor Scholz is probably going to lose elections next year. Europe is moving to the right. It's moving to the conservative and nationalist, even populist right. So that's going to be a factor as well. So he's got a window of opportunity this summer, particularly on the security issue.
And it's interesting you say about Europe moving to the right. That's a huge phenomenon. And of course, if Macron does very badly in those second round of elections, it could be all change. And of course, we look across the other side. Europe is also looking at what's happening in the American elections as well, because what happens in America will affect Europe as well. Do you think Keir Starmer will really try to kind of bolster up his relations with Europe, particularly if he's thinking, right, there might be a Donald Trump presidency?
Yes, and I think, again, this is why collective security, particularly support for Ukraine, tried to lock that in over the next few years. That's something that the Europeans are going to really want to talk to him about, given the distinct possibility of a second Trump term. And he'll want, that's something he wants to talk about. So it's going to be good for him. This summer is going to be good for him in terms of European relations. His longer term plan to ease trade friction, to review the Brexit trade and cooperation agreement, that will be much, much more difficult. That really begins next year.
Well, Bruno, good to catch up with you. Thanks for your time. That's Bruno Waterfield, who covers the European Union for The Times.
Let's now cross to Ukraine and talk to Catherine Philp, the Times World Affairs editor. Hello to you, Catherine.
Hi, John.
Hi. Well, I don't know how much of a splash the British general election news has made in Ukraine, especially, I guess, since, Catherine, the new incoming Labour government has a great deal in common with the outgoing Conservative one when it comes to Ukraine policy. But that in itself, I suppose, is very welcome in Kyiv.
Absolutely. And we've seen President Zelensky warmly welcome Keir Starmer's victory in the expectation that the kind of support that the previous Conservative governments have given him will continue. And everything that Starmer has told us, and his newly appointed Foreign Secretary David Lammy, is that they will continue to support Ukraine in the manner they have done. I think that the key question for Ukraine is, again, more about what happens on the other side of the Atlantic.
Yes. I mean, can you in any way, I don't know, appraise or quantify the importance of an ally like the United Kingdom under a new government in the various international fora where Ukraine needs to make its presence felt and get its message across? I'm thinking G7, NATO, European Union, all of those things take a bit of careful handling at this stage, Catherine.
I think that's right. And I think Bruno is also correct that there's, there's a strong prerogative with the Starmer government to seeking some new security arrangements with Europe to kind of review and essentially sort of make watertight the security arrangements with Britain and European countries. That hasn't really happened because of the, tense relations there have been since Brexit with the Conservative government. I mean, obviously there is a fear for the future of NATO under Trump, or simply, not necessarily whether Trump would pull out of NATO, but whether he would honor it, whether he would give the kind of support to Ukraine that we've seen before. So that European dimension does become more important. Britain's exit from the European Union was a loss for the EU in security terms, as much as it was in any other dimension. There's also the relationship with Washington. Now, I think that that's going to be tricky, although David Lammy has put in a lot of legwork with the Trump team and with Trump associates in Washington, but he's tread very carefully, and obviously he's been doing this on the behalf of the Starmer government. He's tread very carefully, where as David Cameron went over there and sort of, socked it to the Republicans in Congress about how they needed to come on board a bit, and they didn't appreciate being told what to do. So I think that Starmer is going to have to tread very carefully on the American front and try and bring them over, try and persuade them without sort of being seen to lay down the law to them.
Catherine, thank you so much. That's Catherine Philp, Times World Affairs editor.
Well, speaking of all things Trump and stateside, let's head over and speak with David Charter, who covers all things American politics for us here at the Times. David, welcome to the show. I mean, of course, we are absolutely glued to this election, but how's it registering where you are?
Well, we've got a little local difficulty over here for the Democrats because of Biden's terrible debate performance. And that's really sucked up all the political oxygen this week. There is coverage of Starmer's huge majority win in the American media, but it's a little way down the pecking order. And I think there's as much interest perhaps in the French elections as there are in the British elections at the moment. I have to say in recent years that Americans have struggled to get to grips with exactly who is the British Prime Minister and pronounce their names correctly in Biden's case. It's been a strange relationship because we haven't heard much talk anymore about this special relationship, although it still clearly is. It's just that the focus has been necessarily on trying to, as far as this administration is concerned, bolster Ukraine and latterly Israel in the two wars that have erupted under Joe Biden. And of course, he rather damaged relations with allies with the chaotic withdrawal from Afghanistan. Hanging over it all, as you've heard from the other correspondents, is really the question mark about how Trump is going to behave if indeed he does become the president. Who will he make as his Secretary of State? Does that matter? We've seen, I think Catherine alluded to it, that David Lammy has actually been making really significant inroads with the Trump people. He's befriended J.D. Vance, who's a senator from Ohio, tipped as a potential running mate for Trump. Trump's delayed announcing his running mate, we think, to give all the headlines to Biden this week, which have been terrible. But David Lammy has been rather equivocal and upsetting some on the left in Labour by having a more open mind to the potential of a Trump administration. I have to say that he's very well plugged in to the Democrats, having got to know Obama at college when he was at Harvard Law School. He was actually a guest, I think, of Obama at the 2008 inauguration. So he's very well plugged in, is Lammy. I don't think Starmer knows Biden or Trump at all. He's certainly never met Trump. I don't think he's ever met Biden, certainly in an official capacity.
It's really interesting what you say. I mean, I did an event with David Lammy a few months ago, and he had actually just come back from that trip to America, and it was quite a kind of lefty audience that he was speaking at. It was a sort of foreign policy event, and you're right, the atmosphere in the room was quite frosty when he said that he had good meetings with Trump, but he sort of took it on, David. It was quite interesting. He said, look, I'm going to have to work with whoever wins, and I did have productive meetings with Trump's team, and he was quite bullish about that. I thought that was quite interesting. And how do you think he is regarded by Trump's team? Because he has used quite inflammatory language about Trump in the past.
Yeah, but a lot of people have, including J.D. Vance. He was a never Trumper when he started out. Trump is literally open to flattery and sycophancy, of course, but he's open to people who are not simply going to trash talk him every day of the week, but are going to try and look for solutions that present Trump with a win. So providing this is the tricky balancing act that's got to go on, say over Ukraine, the Labour government has got to try and find a way of giving Trump the headlines and the win, whilst perhaps trying to turn the supertanker around to not pulling the rug completely from under Zelensky's feet. So this is going to be a big challenge, of course, if Trump wins. And he said that on day one, he will bring an end to the war in Ukraine.
Okay.